Welcome back to The Price of Business. I am your host, Kevin Price. We got a special edition with our time with Walter Rogers. You know him, Walter Rogers. He's extraordinarily good at what he does. One of the premier sales and customer relation experts, in my opinion, in the country. And Walter, welcome today to the Price of Business. It's special because we're going to get to spend 2 segments with you today. How are you, sir? And I'm
doing outstanding, Kevin. The highlight of my week is always, and I'm calling you from the Bahamas today, so I am double outstanding.
All right, and I guess we're going to have a slight delay, it sounds like, there when we hear you. But a little delay is better than not hearing you at all. We got a big crowd today in our room, if you will. I want to jump straight to it. Why don't you introduce us to your guest today?
Yeah, absolutely. And Kevin, today what we're going to be talking about is the best practice of cultivating commitment inside of your customer accounts. And we are really, really fortunate to have 3 of the top performers at Sprint, Chris, Lacey, and Justin. They're calling in from Portland, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C., so we really are crisscrossing the country with information here today. And again, going back to the topic of cultivating commitment, and we have found that there's really a few things that we need to talk about. Number one, most successful sales professionals tend to spend about 10% of their time really educating the universe, right, promoting their business to the community at large. About 30% of their time cultivating relationships with prospective customers, and then 60% of their time, really enhancing the relationships with those customers that they already have. And you might already know that it costs 5 times as much to sell a new customer as it does to keep one, right, and keep one happy. And by the way, the 10th purchase from an existing customer is typically 80% larger than the first. So there's a whole lot of reason to hear what these folks have to say in terms of, best practices around capturing and keeping customers. And I was chatting with them before the show, and they each have really unique perspective, and I asked them to think about, their top characteristics that they feel has attributed to their success. And these folks haven't missed their quota in many, many, many quarters. So they've got a lot of good information to share with us. And Kevin, what I thought we would do is just round robin between Chris, Lacey, and Justin and get them to share their top characteristics and run through it that way over the next 2 segments. What do you think?
Yeah, go right ahead. Go ahead. And I'm going to depend heavily on you because you're going to be able to navigate through these names, and I'm going to throw out the occasional question out there. So let's jump right in.
That sounds great. So, Chris, why don't we start with you? So what would you say your most important attribute? Just think of the most important, and you'll get a chance to talk about a few more. And let's talk about that attribute and how it's helped you be successful.
Well, I think the most important thing is to deliver on what you promise. So never commit to something that you can't deliver on. So, for example, I'll be in a conference room with decision makers for deciding whether or not they're going to decide with our company or the competition, and the competition will have gone first, and they will have promised everything under the sun. They will everything that they've asked. Hey, can you do this? And they've said yes, we can. And when when they start to ask me those questions, I typically will pull back and say, well, I can't commit to that, or I can't promise that, and I'll be committing only to the things I know I can deliver on. And our prospects are naturally suspicious of salespeople. So when they hear me saying, hey, I can't definitely commit to that, they'll say to me, well, your competition says that they can. And I'll say, well, that's kind of hard to commit to, but I don't feel comfortable committing to that. They naturally trust me more than my competition, and that helps me win business.
What do you attribute that to? Is that this long-term congruency in the relationship, the way you do things?
Well, people want to work with people they can trust. And
right.
If you're constantly, every time someone asks you, can you do this, can you do that, and they know they've worked with salespeople in the past, the one thing that they don't want to work with is somebody that they can't trust, that promises in the world and then under-delivers. And we have a saying at Sprint, under-promise and over-deliver, and that's what we really try to do.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Walter?
And Kevin, isn't it amazing how most people just cannot live to that standard? They just can't. They
and it seems so simple, but
things are going to cost more than what they said, and that just damages trust. And like Chris says, it's all about trust at the end of the day. Lacey, what about you? What would you say your attribute is?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us. And to answer your question, I would just say hard work. If you put in the hours to outwork the competition, to be disciplined enough to work from home with all the distractions that you may have, just simply hard work. There's no other way to say it.
And when you say hard work, are you saying, what does that mean? Anything in particular to you, or can you give us a little more detail about what hard work means?
Sure. It means actually working, because a lot of sales reps will find these fun jobs and sometimes not even work. That's not the case in our situation. We're actually working hard to support our clients, answering their emails in a very timely manner. I mean, we have the communication tools to do it, so we should be very responsive. And also prospecting. That's another thing that flies by the wayside a lot of the times, but you have to prospect.
And prospecting for a lot of salespeople is certainly hard work, mostly because they don't know how and they're afraid to do it. And Lacey, with your track record, I'm sure that that's not the case. But let's move on to Justin. Justin, why don't you share with us one?
Well, one of my things, especially coming from the account manager type of a role, is we got to be there to hold the customer's hand when things aren't going good for them. I know we're just coming out of a pretty bad economy, so I spend a lot of my time sitting down and, dealing with drastic reductions in the organization. And if you're there for them when things are bad and you're taking time out of your day to meet with them and, adjust their invoice and really talk about solutions that may help them get out of this downtime, they really look at you as more of a consultant as opposed to just your typical sales guy. So that's really helped me, especially now that customers are starting to grow again. And they're like, well, if Justin was here when things weren't good, he's going to be such an asset to our organization when things start to pick up. So it really goes back to, kind of building that trust and delivering on the promises that you've made to them.
And any specific examples, Justin, that you could share with us without obviously violating any customer trust as to how this skill has helped you in your career?
Well, absolutely. I spent a lot of, the second half of 2009 just meeting with customers, construction customers in particular, that were, reducing their labor force by 40%. And, they could be faced with things like early termination fees. And if you can really get down to their level and just let them know that, you're there for them and you're a consultant, and figuring out new ways that maybe they could use their existing lines or figure out ways to flip-flop services to help them, lean out their account, the bond is so much stronger. We even did things where, because we knew they were downsizing, we'd renew their contract at what they thought was a good level at that point. And then it benefits the sales professional as well, because when things start to grow, you can ride that train with them as well, as opposed to coming back to, an account that's, has way underutilization, and then as, they're growing employees, you don't see the benefits of that as an account manager if they already have the services. So it's just really being adaptive to their business needs.
And coming out of the recessionary cycle, that's such an important thing to do, because most organizations felt some pretty challenging times, and a lot of contracts are in place, and certainly you can enforce contracts for what they are. And if a customer situation changes and they can't really take advantage of the entire service as is listed in that contract, and you force them to basically eat it, they're going to remember that, and when it's time to renew, they're going to move on somewhere else. So you obviously have terrific support from management on flexibility around those things as well, and that says a lot about you and says a lot about the company, of course. Kevin, anything you want to comment on this before we move on to Chris again?
Yeah, and, I think one of the things that I think is really important is that there's a congruency in terms of how, and I'm sure this is a big value there at Sprint, is that there's a congruency in the way you do things and the way you say things, and that there's a constant congruency. It's not like there's the sales guy and then there's the service person. It's maintained throughout with a level of expertise. Any comments on that?
Yeah.
No, exactly. I find that one of the best things that you can do, though, is kind of sell outside your comfort zone. So I find that the competition usually does a really good job of managing the relationship of the people that actually control your product. So they're very good at managing the IT group. In fact, I routinely get emails back saying, well, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but we're not interested. And really what that means is, if you send us another email or give us another call, we're going to start to think you're unbalanced, So you got to think of a different way to approach getting these Fortune 100 companies. And what I do is you find what your company does best. So at Sprint, we have wireless cards that that access the internet from your laptop, and they're better than the competition, and there's no one can doubt it. Basically, it's 7 to 10 times faster. So what I typically do is
I'm sorry, I got to interrupt. We're fixing to have to take a break. Got to pay some bills here.
Okay.
You're listening to The Price of Business. We got a great conversation here that Walter Rogers is co-chairing with me here on sales, taking your business to the next level, and really dealing with customers' needs on The Price of Business. You're listening to the new Talk 650 powered by CBS Radio.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside.
Welcome back to The Price of Business. I am your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. We got Walter Rogers. He is here. He is on the phone. He's actually in the other part of the country, other part of the world, actually. Hey, real quickly, again, reintroduce our lineup here today.
Yeah, sure. We've got Chris, Lacey, and Justin from Sprint, top performers from Sprint, joining us talking about some of the best practices that they use in their profession. And Chris was just sharing with us his thoughts around selling outside of your comfort zone. Kevin, I thought maybe we could pick up where he left off.
Go right ahead.
Great. So selling outside your comfort zone, obviously everyone's comfort zone is calling someone in the IT group because it's not stressful. You feel comfortable talking to those people. But, I routinely, and I'll use an example from last month, I was trying to get into a company it's a Fortune 50 company in the United States, and I was getting these emails back, and I finally got an email back that said, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but, and that's really the email that says, you contact us again and we're thinking you're unbalanced, just stay away from us, basically, kind of email. So what I do at that point is I look for the one product or one of the products that we sell that's better than the competition, that nobody can touch. And with Sprint, it's our wireless cards. They're 7 to 10 times faster than the competition in all the major markets. So what I did with this company is I reached out to the CFO, and I signed up for a service that gives email addresses for just about everybody in every organization. It's a web tracker tool. So I have the email address for the CFO. I reach out to him, and I give a value proposition for that, for our cards and why they're so much faster. They're 7 to 10 times faster. I give all the reviews for it, and then I talk about the costs, and it was 3 days later, I get a call back from the director of IT, and he says, come on in for a meeting. And we come in for a meeting, and we have products now, piloting right now with that organization. And we had nothing with this organization before, and it's a Fortune 50 organization. So it's our foot in the door. And if you don't feel comfortable selling to those C-level execs, you're never going to get to that point.
Hey, Chris, can you share with the audience the name of that tool that you use? That sounds like a really great tool that gets you email addresses.
Yeah, it's Zoom. So and they give I think 3 months free. So if you go on there, they give you 3 months free. You can pretty much plug in any corporation. So you plug it in, and they'll give you the email addresses and the titles and the phone numbers for everybody within that organization, or most people within that organization. And the thing that's different about that type of tool is it actually gives you the email addresses. Those other tools that you have out there, they give you the names and the phone numbers, but not the email addresses.
Yeah, and a lot of people like to get communicated in multiple ways: email, phone, fax, whatever. You've got to use all sorts of methods to get through. So, thanks for sharing that, Chris. Lacey, what about you? What other attribute would you like to share with us?
Well, speaking of methods of contacting people, that's a basic prospecting 101 would be my second attribute that I'd like to share. As a hunter here at Sprint, my focus is generally to obtain new logos and acquisitions. So with that said, you have to touch people with email calls, even doing what we call drive-bys, which is just stopping in unannounced and trying to meet with a decision maker. With that, I love to get creative and fun with it. So different things that I've used for Halloween one year, I took a small pumpkin and a small carving kit and kind of created a little letter saying carve some time for Sprint and, requested a meeting that way. Sometimes I like to take in walkers to the gatekeepers because it's always important to really win the heart of the gatekeeper too, and always say we have Whopper deals at Sprint, and just kind of smile and really try to get my foot in the door that way. Also, you would never know that there's a chocolate Lover's Day, And so I usually take chocolate into gatekeepers then or into the C-level executives or IT directors that I'm trying to meet with and get my foot in the door. So it's really basic prospecting 101. You have to do it.
Yeah, I think people
I did not know there was a chocolate day. Kevin, did you know there was a chocolate day?
I had no idea. And there's a day probably for everything. Probably some days that aren't even appropriate to say on the radio. But one of the things that is interesting though is that everyone in every field like to get to the point where they can stop doing the basics that made them successful. Because sometimes that means getting your hands dirty. Sometimes that means working harder than what you really want to do. But you reiterated what I think is one of the most important concepts in business, which is exactly that. You got to roll up your sleeves in order to maintain the business that made you successful in the first place. So you got to continually do that.
Absolutely.
So I think that's an important principle. Let me ask you, when it comes back to some of those fundamentals and some of those basics, how much more important is it, to be contacting a client, not because you need to try to renew an order or renew a deal with them, but just simply because you want to maintain relationship and they see you outside of that context. Would someone like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll talk about that, Kevin. This is Justin, because that's really all I do, being an account manager. And you got to know how your customer wants to be managed. Even if they're not buying, something from you, they may be the customer that loves a drop by. They may be the customer that doesn't really want to see your face, but would appreciate a call over the standard typical email. Email is just very impersonal, and it just doesn't show your commitment. So I find if you really can tailor what your customer likes to what you can provide, you can be far more successful when they decide that it's really time to sit down and listen to what you have to offer and what more you can bring their business.
Very good, very good. Walter?
Yeah,
can I add to that, though? Do you mind? This is Chris. I think it's good to meet with the customers, but I think one of the things that I used to do when I was in sales, when I was more of an account manager role, way back when, is I'd get that relationship really solid with the IT group and maybe the VP of operations, and what would happen is I'd think I was just imperfect, and then all of a sudden, just out of the blue, I'd find out that the competition was bringing in their products into one of the divisions, and I knew nothing about it, and I was shocked by the whole thing. And the reason it is the same reason why I'm successful is that the competition had gone to the C-level execs. They had gotten someone to champion at one of the business divisions and gone right to the C-level execs. So I really think that you shouldn't. I think salespeople tend to spend too much time with the people that actually control the account and too little time with the C-level execs and the various business units.
Yeah, and one of the things that we find, Chris, is that so many times, especially when you're dealing with these really large companies, that one department doesn't even know what the other department is doing. And one of the values that salespeople really bring to the party is even just, ensuring that different departments are aware of what other departments are doing, helping cross some of those communication gaps that invariably exist in every single large organization. Anybody want to comment on that?
No one does.
I think you're absolutely right. This is Chris again, but I think you're absolutely right. And that's where everybody's vulnerable. Is if you can, the competition's vulnerable. When I'm typically going after new business, and that's where they're vulnerable. Is they don't go out to the different business units and looking to see how their business is changing and how they can offer new services that'll help the changing environment of that business. And if you can get out to those business units and get someone to champion your product, it doesn't matter if the IT director doesn't want your services at all. They don't have the political strength to stop it. And that's what you really have to keep in mind. If you have an existing account, you have to keep that in mind, that just because your IT director loves you, that's not going to help things if the C-level exec decides to bring in something else, or vice versa. That's a way to get in new products.
Yeah, and this is Justin. Chris, just to build off that too, is sometimes the person that's really comfortable likes to be comfortable just with you and won't introduce you to other parts of the organization. So it's kind of a tippy-toe type of a game trying to work around them.
Hey, we're going to have to...
No, I agree completely, Justin.
Hey, Walter, we're going to have to wrap it up. Appreciate it. Very good discussion, very in-depth, and a lot of information there. Walter Rogers, of course, he's with BakerCommunications.com. That number, again, is BakerCommunications.com. Walter, can you give a website representative of your guest today?
www.sprint.com.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of a very busy 2 segments here on The Price of Business. Do want to mention, of course, that this show continues 24/7 at priceofbusiness.com, where you can get the best in news and information, and you get great content from my friend Walter Rogers, who is, I think he's writing a book there at priceofbusiness.com. When you go there, just click the contributor page, look for Walter Rogers, and in fact, I think he's on the news page section, so you can get that information there. But very important content there, and in fact, among the most original content in business news. And so we encourage you to become a subscriber there of The Price of Business while you are visiting there. All right, when we come back, we're going to showcase some of the businesses here that are making a difference in the Houston area. One of our ongoing efforts, including some rather creative businesses as well. It's been very interesting to see the type of businesses out there, and they can all figure out how to make a niche in an otherwise challenging economy. It's kind of fun to watch. And so we want to encourage you to literally now you can watch it with us, by the way, if you want to go to ustream.tv at /priceofbusiness.com. I am Kevin Price. You are listening to The Price of Business on the new Talk 650, powered by CBS Radio.